Shabbat Shalom. I have a question to ask. We know from the Talmud that we celebrate Chanukah because there was only enough oil to light the menorah for one day, but it lasted for 8 days. So if the miracle is that the oil lasted an additional 7 days, why do we light the Chanukiah and celebrate the miracle beginning with the first night of Hanukkah rather than the second night? Think about it. If the miracle is that the oil kept burning from the second through the 7th days, why do we light the Chanukiah on the first night? Why do we say the prayer giving thanks to God for miracles when the miracle didn't happen the first day? Now, I'll tell you this last week as we entered Chanukah, I was not my normal joyful self. Usually I love Hanukkah. It's one of my favorite holidays of the year. And if this were a Chanukah like any other, I would start this Shabbat with a joke. Maybe something like, the story is told of a woman named Miriam who bought all sorts of Hanukkah cards for her kids and grandkids and went to the post office to send the cards to her kids and her grandkids. And sure enough, she came to the counter and she needed to buy postage. So she said to the person behind the counter, I have to buy postage for all of my kids and my grandkids to send them these cards. And the woman behind the counter said, Ma'am, in what denominations would you like them? And the woman thought and said, wow, I can't believe we've come to this point. I'll take 6 Reform, 10 Conservative, and 18 Orthodox. And if this were a Hanukkah like any other, then I might start with a different joke. I might say, what divides, what is the difference between Maccabees and dragons? What is the difference between Maccabees and dragons? And you might say, well, the Maccabees lit candles for 8 nights, and the dragons just 8 nights. But this is not a Chanukah like any other. And so I will tell you, as we approach the first night of Hanukkah this last week, I was, as many of you know, because you've been kind enough to ask me, I was sad. I'm angry. And I'm tired. And I've been sad before. I'm not sure that I've ever been this angry. And I can tell you for sure, I don't think I've ever been this tired. Since October 7th, I will tell you that I've been working night and day to tell the world that the Jewish people have the right to defend themselves in our own land. Since October 7th, I've been working night and day to tell the world that we Jews in America don't have to be, we cannot be, we should not be subject to harassment and intimidation, to violence and to vandalism. I've been working tirelessly night and day in my anger and my sadness. I will tell you that I've been quoted in the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press and even the New York Times. I've appeared on television on Channel 2, on Channel 4, and Channel 7, and even Sky News Australia. I will tell you that I've been writing. You know, because you keep getting the emails. Non-stop writing for the Jewish News, for Times of Israel, for social media. I've been trying to get the word out to the best of my ability in every way that I can. That our brothers and sisters in Israel have a right to defend themselves in the Holy Land. And that we Jews here in America cannot and should not be subject to intimidation and harassment, to vandalism and violence. And I know that you know exactly how I feel, because so many of you are doing the exact same things. You are writing and you're speaking. Your voice is being heard here and in the halls of Congress, and certainly on the college campus. I know that you, like me, are sad, that you, like me, are angry, that you, like me, are tired. And so here we come now to this holiday of Chanukah. And maybe you, like me, are feeling the incredible darkness that seems to be surrounding us all. And so it is that we remember why we celebrate this holiday of Chanukah. And in the book of Maccabees, these post-biblical books from the Apocrypha, it tells us about a group of people named the Maccabees, from a family named Hashmonai, the Hasmonean family, who were tired of watching the other Jews assimilate into Greek culture. And so the Maccabees rose up to attack their fellow Jews who had assimilated. Well, the Greek-Syrian leadership saw the Maccabees in their zealotry attacking these assimilated Greek Jews. And so the Greek-Syrians swooped in, and they desecrated the Holy Temple. And they began to outlaw Judaism, circumcision, celebration of Shabbat. And they made worship of our one God nearly impossible. And they began then to attack the Maccabees. We weren't able to celebrate Sukkot in that season the way we wanted to, because the Holy Temple had been desecrated. But a miracle happened, and the Maccabees were able to cast off the yoke of the Greek Syrians. They were able to push them out of the land, and they were able to rededicate the Holy Temple. And of course, in Hebrew, the way we say dedicate is Chanukah, from the dedication of our Holy Temple, Chanukat Habayit. And in that moment, the Maccabees, who had not been able to celebrate Sukkot 2 months before, decided now was the time to celebrate Sukkot since we had rededicated the Holy Temple. And according to the Bible, Sukkot lasts 7 days, and Shmini Atzeret 1 day. And so they had a great festival and celebration that lasted for 8 days. And that's why the book of Maccabees tells us we celebrate this holiday of Chanukah. But fast forward several centuries. The Hasmonean family, the Maccabees, took over not only as priests of the Holy Temple, but as kings of Israel. They became corrupt over the centuries. They allowed non-Jews to take over the kingship. And our society, the Jewish kingdom, began to crumble under their corruption. And a few centuries later, we read in the Talmud, not in some section called Maccabees, not in a great tractate called Chanukah, but actually in a section on Shabbat, where the rabbis are wrestling with how we light Shabbat candles, that they ask the question, why Chanukah? Why Hanukkah? We've been lighting these Chanukiot for all these centuries. Why in the world do we celebrate Hanukkah? And they tell us the story of oil, with which we're very familiar. There was only enough oil to last for 1 night, but Nes Gadol Haya Sham, a great miracle happened there, and the oil lasted for 8 days. And so we celebrate this holiday of Chanukah by lighting the Chanukah menorah, by lighting the Chanukiah with all 8 branches to remind us of the miracle that lasted for 8 days. These are stories we know. Why did the rabbis of the Talmud not focus on the military victory? Why did the rabbis of Talmud not celebrate the Maccabees casting off the yoke of the Greek Syrians? Why is that not the central focus of the holiday, but rather the miracle of the oil? And I think the answer is because the rabbis who lived in the diaspora, under the thumb of the Babylonians, under the thumb of the Romans, under the thumb of our oppressors, didn't feel comfortable celebrating military strength. They didn't feel comfortable celebrating our might. They didn't feel comfortable telling the story of how we cast off the yoke of our oppressors in order to reestablish autonomy in the Promised Land. And so they chose to focus on the miracle of the oil because they were afraid to talk about our strength, and it was a lot easier to focus on our vulnerability. Here we are today, in the midst of our strength and in the midst of incredible vulnerability. We give thanks that the Jewish people now have an army to defend ourselves against our enemies, against those who seek our destruction and to take our land. At the same time, we see how vulnerable our brothers and sisters in Israel are, and we know how vulnerable we are here in America. But though we are vulnerable here in America, we are not powerless. We actually have the strength of our word, and we have the strength of our pens. We have the strength these days of our fingers to type into the computer. If you have not been speaking out to the news about our brothers and sisters in Israel and their right to defend themselves in our land, then what are you doing with your time? If you've not been writing to our elected officials locally in Lansing and in Washington to thank them for their support of Israel, to condemn them for their condemnations of Israel, or to say, why aren't you standing up against anti-Semitism here in America? If you've not been taking the time to do that with your pen or with your computer, then what are you doing with your time? And if you've not been giving more money to Jewish organizations, to Israeli organizations, or to political candidates than you ever have before, then what are you doing with your pocketbooks? Because right now we have to be giving more of ourselves than perhaps at any time before. With our words, with our pens and our keyboards, and with our pocketbooks. We have to be standing up for the Jewish people in Israel. We have to be standing up for the Jewish people here in North America. Yes, we are vulnerable, but we are not powerless. As compared to the rest of Jewish history, of course we are vulnerable, but we are far from powerless. And we have an obligation to act. So I'll bring you back now to the first question that I asked. We know the miracle was that the oil lasted for the additional 7 days. But why do we light the Chanukah on the first day when we had enough oil for the first light? And I'll share with you a teaching that my friend and colleague Rabbi Ari Hart shared with me in the name of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, in the name of Rabbi David Hartman. The reason we still light the Chanukah on the first night of Hanukkah is not because of the divine miracle that kept the oil burning for the additional 7 days. We light that first candle because of the human miracle, that the Maccabees had the strength to stand up for the Jewish people. The Maccabees had the faith in themselves to light the Chanukah, the menorah, even though they weren't sure what was going to happen next. And we light the Hanukkah menorah, we light the Chanukah on that first night of Hanukkah, because even though times are dark, we have hope that there will be a better tomorrow. Friends, we are vulnerable today in Israel, and we are vulnerable here in North America. But we are not powerless. We have the opportunity, we have the ability, we have the strength to act with our words, to act with our pens, to act with our keyboards, to act with our cell phones. And we have the opportunity and the ability to act with our pocketbooks as well. Not because God will necessarily send forth a miracle, but because we believe in ourselves, because we know of our strength, because we have faith in each other, because we have hope in our hearts for a better and a more peaceful tomorrow. That's why we light the Chanukah on the first night of Hanukkah. Because when I look out at this sacred community, I know that I can trust you. I hope when you look back at me, you know that you can trust me. And we light the Chanukah on that first night because of the miracle that we're in this together and that we have each other. These are dark times, but here we are now in the midst of Hanukkah, and we're commanded to be joyful. We're commanded to bring light. We're commanded to give thanks and celebrate for God's presence in our life, for God standing up for the Jewish people and for Israel, and because we are standing up for each other. And so let us pray as we do every week. Adonai oz li'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless us with strength. May we realize that strength to act. And in so doing, may God bless us all with light, with joy, and with peace. And let us say together, Amen. Shabbat Shalom and Happy Chanukah.